we have seen people who were criminalized for a miscarriage, then they were reported to the Child Protective Services, so-called Child Protective Services system, and separated from their children. And then they were referred to ICE for deportation and detained for deportation. So we
Hello, I'm Françoise Girard with the famous podcast. You can find us online at fmus.org. Today, we're speaking with Denise Tomasini-Joshi, who's the co-executive director of If, When, How, Lawyers for Reproductive Justice. If, When, How fights the use of the criminal law against pregnant and birthing people in the United States. Denise herself is a lawyer, and she previously worked for the Innocence Project, the project that frees people wrongfully convicted. She also was at the Open Society Foundations for many years, where her work focused on combating the abuses against marginalized persons in the context of healthcare. And she is also a proud Latina. So let's talk to Denise about what's been going on with the use of criminal law against pregnant persons in the United States, a very serious situation. So, Denise, it's really great to see you. I wanted to speak with you about something that my listeners and viewers might not be aware of, and it's the work that you do at If, When, and How. In the US, we often hear that the laws that specifically criminalize abortion don't target pregnant persons. You know, that pregnant persons are not the ones being criminalized, that these laws target healthcare providers like doctors, and also those who help the pregnant persons obtain the abortions. But the reality is different, right? That in fact, pregnant persons in the US are often criminalized during pregnancy and childbirth for a variety of reasons. This is the work you do, so can you explain to us what is going on here and give us some examples of the ways in which pregnant persons are criminalized?
Absolutely. And, I think that it's really important to note that people have been criminalized for their pregnancy outcomes for many, many years before the fall of Roe. So people are thinking that we are in this moment of crisis because of the fall of Roe, but the reality is that people have been experiencing criminalization around their pregnancy outcomes for years before the fall of Roe. And part of the reason why that's the case is because some of the laws that are used to criminalize people, to arrest people for their pregnancy outcomes, have nothing to do with abortion. So people will get prosecuted for things such as concealing a birth, abuse of a corpse, child abuse, and also they're charged with crimes that include homicide, manslaughter, murder. These are charges that are available to prosecutors who want to make something out of nothing. So if you end up having a miscarriage or a stillbirth, there's ways that prosecutors have to find laws already in the books and to make a case making you responsible for that particular miscarriage or stillbirth, or for other, unfortunate pregnancy outcomes. Like, people are drug tested in hospitals after giving birth to perfectly healthy babies. And if the baby tests positive, that's another way to criminalize the birthing parent for something that may or may not be a medical issue for the baby. So it's really unfortunate that this is the world that we live in, where we punish birthing people for their pregnancy outcomes in ways that aren't even related to very unhelpful abortion laws. Although, to be sure, more and more states are passing laws that are creating this air of criminality around poor pregnancy outcomes, and that has very unintended consequences and intended consequences.
Right. And this is very strange to me if you think about it. Why would you go out of your way to criminalize, let's say, a woman who's delivering a baby in your hospital, a healthy baby, you test her, you find that she maybe has marijuana in her body, and that you're going to call the cops. Like, what is behind all this? Who benefits from this?
It's really, I mean, I think that there is this instinct to punish in our country. And I think that, that instinct becomes more apparent when you are dealing with people who are already made vulnerable in other ways. So women are always deemed to be suspicious for anything related to their health. And we're talking mostly also about Black and brown women who are criminalized and who are tested and who are seen with suspicion. Hospitals are often required to do things that are very unhelpful. And also, people don't really understand their responsibilities under the law. Our position at If, When, How is that HIPAA prevents doctors from making certain kinds of claims. But then there are criminal laws that say that if there's a criminal case, HIPAA doesn't apply. So then
What's HIPAA for those who don't know?
HIPAA is the law in the United States that requires privacy for your health conditions. HIPAA
Yeah.
prevents people from talking about medical matters unless you provide specific approval. So my husband, my father, my parents could not go to my doctor and talk to them about my health as a grown adult woman without my
Right.
permission because HIPAA protects my medical privacy. And that's really important for all sorts of people. It's important not just for people who are pregnant, but also for people who suffer from HIV, who suffer from other illnesses that they don't want their employer or their neighbors or anybody to know about. So health privacy is really important. People should not need to know what kind of medications I'm on or what kind of medical treatment I'm getting. But if hospitals decide to that you are being suspected of a crime and they call the police, then there's a way around HIPAA that is created in their minds, sometimes legally even. So it's a complicating factor. Our position again is that HIPAA prevents medical providers from talking about your pregnancy. And unfortunately, that's not the case. That's not the way that laws are interpreted in many places. We do find that nurses and doctors will call the police on women who are experiencing miscarriages.
Yes, and HIPAA is a federal law, right? In the
HIPAA
US?
is a federal law.
Federal
There
law.
are state versions of medical privacy, but HIPAA is a federal law, so it should apply equally in every state. But as we can see, our federated system does have the unintended consequence that laws are interpreted in particular ways in particular states.
Right, right. And some of these criminal laws at state level for, let's say drug use and so those laws should not supersede the federal act, right? But somehow in the
Exactly.
interpretation of it, right, right. So
Yes.
tell me, what does HIF when how do in cases like this? So how do you intervene? You're a group of lawyers for reproductive justice, right? So
Yes.
what is
So
your
we
role?
are lawyers and advocates who believe that people should have the freedom to decide if, when, and how to become parents and how to parent those children. We have a national helpline that responds to calls from people who have questions about accessing abortion, about the law, about accessing legal assistance. We also have a Repro Legal Defense Fund that helps people with bail when they are charged with a crime and arrested. That helps people pay for legal services and for other kinds of legal costs related to their criminalization. We also have an advocacy arm that helps change the laws in particular states. Currently, really only in Nevada, self-managed abortion is a crime, but as we can see, there are many other laws that come into play to criminalize people for their reproductive choices. And our advocacy team looks at different state laws and tries to figure out where legal legislative changes can be made. We also have a network of law students and lawyers who can help go pay bail for somebody, who can help people in particular states get representation and get legal help if they need it. And then we have the litigators who actually will take some of the cases that come in through the helpline and help litigate. They draft amicus briefs, they support local counsel when there's local counsel appointed, and we also just do our own representation of people who may be charged with crimes.
And can you give me an example of a recent case you've dealt with where you represented
Yes.
someone who's being accused?
Yeah, absolutely. So very recently, we represented Moira Ackers in Maryland, and she is a woman who found herself, she's a mother who found herself pregnant with a child that she felt she could not afford. She was dealing with poverty. She already had children. She felt like, it would be difficult to carry this pregnancy to term. So she did some Google searches trying to find abortion care, ended up not being able to find care or just not working fast enough to be able to access that abortion care. Continued to carry the pregnancy, but again, she's poor, she's not seeing a doctor. She ends up having a tragic stillbirth. Like most people do, after a stillbirth, she just like took the remains of the stillbirth, put them away. She continued to feel ill, so she went to the hospital, and at the hospital called the police because they could tell that she had given birth, but the outcome of the birth was not with her. She explained that she had had a stillbirth, and they called the police on her, and the police charged her with murder because they argued she had not accessed prenatal care, even though she could not afford prenatal care, and because she had Googled abortion, they just assumed that she had done harm to a live birth instead of experiencing a stillbirth. There's a lot of bad faith suppositions in all of that. Stillbirths are traumatic. How people respond in those situations is something that, we can never know unless we're in that situation. And actually, research shows that she responded in the way that most people respond to a stillbirth, which is to try to, dispose of the remains, stillbirths and miscarriages as well. People respond in this way. They flush things down the toilet. They throw things away. And unfortunately, she was criminalized. She was given 30 years. So there's the chance that her children will not see their mother for 30 years or ever again, possibly. So we represented her. Then the case went on appeal, and she was represented by other lawyers we supported with amicus briefs in that appeal. And the Supreme Court of Maryland made the very wise decision of essentially telling the prosecutors, you cannot look at somebody's Google searches that they do early in
Right.
their pregnancy to determine what happened later in their pregnancy. There are First Amendment issues. There are just, again, you're just jumping through so many hoops, assuming that because somebody Googled something, that they must have done something else months later. So the Supreme Court of Maryland said, no, you cannot look at those Google searches and look at the fact that she did not receive prenatal care to assume that she has committed murder. So that's a case that we dealt with very recently.
And what's the situation for her at this point, since her Google searches are not admissible?
So they are still prosecuting her. They've sent the case back to the lower court. The Maryland prosecutors are continuing to prosecute her, arguing that this was a live birth, even though there is no evidence that she had given birth to a live
A
baby,
live baby.
that it wasn't a stillbirth. They are using pseudoscience to try to support the fact that that there was a live birth involved. And it's notable that this is Maryland. This is not
Right.
red state. This is
No,
a state where reproductive rights are supposed to be part of the daily condition of people. But we can see how precarious it is to be a birthing person, in particular, a birthing person with low resources, somebody who's living in poverty in every state.
right. I was going to say Maryland is not a restrictive state when it comes to abortion. Abortion is
Yeah.
normally available. So why is this is really scary? I mean, she's being criminalized for poverty, basically, and lack of access to health care and
Lack
lack
of
of
access to
resources.
healthcare. Yeah, that's essentially what she's being criminalized for. And it's incredibly concerning. I think, again, there's just this air of criminality that has been inserted into everything post Roe that allows prosecutors to go after people, even if something looks even mildly illegal. And a lot of assumptions need to be made. And unfortunately, a lot of assumptions are made about poor people giving birth in our country, to criminalize them for things that would just be seen as tragedies in any other context.
That's right. And Maryland isn't the only so-called progressive state where this is going on, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there's other cases in places like what, New York,
yeah.
California.
In New York, in California, we are seeing cases where people are being prosecuted because of their miscarriages or their stillbirths. Again, concealment of remains, a concealment of pregnancy, improper disposal of remains. All these laws are used to go after people. Unfortunately, is low-hanging fruit for some prosecutors, and they do tend to see people, poor women in particular, who have these negative birthing outcomes with suspicion, and they are a target of these overzealous prosecutions.
And you said this was going on well before Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Yes,
Uh, but have you seen an increase since Roe has been overturned? Is this just revving up
yes.
across the United States?
There is an increase, and in part there's an increase because I think this air of criminality that has been inserted into everything creates certain confusion. I mean, to be sure, there are some medical providers who are not on the side of women and on the side of birthing people generally. But there are people who are genuinely confused, who see somebody coming in with a medical condition who needs an abortion, and they say, it's like, I don't think that I can provide you with an abortion because I could be breaking the law. There are people who think that they are required to call the police when they see certain things coming to their emergency room. And that means that there's a lot of education that needs to happen. So part of what my organization, If When How, does is that we provide trainings to providers who say, we're really confused about what the law says or doesn't say. We keep up with the very fast moving changes in the law to make sure that when people call the helpline, we can say, well, in your state, actually, the law says X or Y. We get phone calls from people all the time who are just confused about what the law says. And that confusion creates more instances, more opportunities for people to be criminalized over things that are actually not against the law. It is the system that I think was intentionally created to make people afraid to seek reproductive care.
Right, right. And are you seeing, so it happens in so-called progressive states, but what are you seeing in restrictive states, states where abortion has been banned de facto or altogether?
Yeah.
Is there also a real increase in these other prosecutions for drug use or harm to the fetus or improper disposal of remains, et cetera, et cetera. Is
Yeah.
that also part of the toolkit, let's say, of these prosecutors to demonize women?
Absolutely. Those prosecutions have increased, as have legal cases that are not criminal legal cases. You know, we see in Texas abusers, domestic violence, perpetrators of domestic violence being weaponized to really attack people through the civil system, you know, suing former partners and their friends for an abortion. It has become, you know, something that pro-life people in Texas have decided is acceptable, just getting in league with domestic violence abusers. But in places like
Wow.
Texas, we have seen a real increase. Maternal mortality in Texas has really increased because people are afraid of going to their doctors. They now increasingly see hospitals as sites of, you know, state violence, a place where they can be arrested, a place where they can be subjected to deportation, a place where, you know, once the police is called on you, you are subject also to the family separation system. Once they call so-called child protective services, you can be separated from your children as well. So all of
Yes.
these systems of state violence work together to make people afraid to access healthcare. And that means that the harms to birthing people and to women in particular are really increasing exponentially. So criminal prosecutions are up, separations of people are up, the empowerment of domestic abusers is up, and the fear of the immigration system is also inserted in there so that, you know, it decreases people's access to information, to respectful healthcare, to the options that they have. Um, a recent case in Texas, and this woman is part of the lawsuit in Texas, but it's a case that we work with. It's a woman named Cristina Nunez, and she made her name public when she filed the lawsuit. But what happened with her is that she is a sufferer of renal failure. So she's at end stage kidney disease.
Right.
She's somebody who has been receiving dialysis for a very long time. She became pregnant. Her doctors told her that she should have an abortion because this was very life-threatening to her being pregnant. She could not get one in Texas. She tried to go out of state. That was complicated. She ended up in the emergency room, and the only solution to her um, medical problem was to have an abortion, and Texas doctors would not give her an abortion until she called the helpline, and she was able to get a pro bono lawyer who represented her, and she was able to get an abortion. But this poor woman ended up having almost an arm need to be amputated. She had a black arm. She had deep vein thrombosis. She almost died in a
Wow.
hospital that
Wow.
refused to do the one thing that would save her life until a lawyer intervened. So we always say you should not need a lawyer to receive life-saving care. You should not need a lawyer to access respectful care. And yet that is exactly what happened in this particular case. Had she not had a lawyer, all of these doctors with all the medical equipment necessary to save her life would have just watched her die in the
Wow.
emergency room, where she was for 11 days before the lawyer intervened and was able to give her the life-saving abortion that she needed.
This makes me very angry listening to this story. I'm just enraged.
Yeah,
Uh,
it
i-
is enraging. And she is just one of many Texas women who are essentially being told your life no longer matters as much as you continue in this pregnancy.
wow. And let's get back to this notion that abusers, domestic
Yeah.
abusers, are being empowered. How does that work specifically in a place like Texas? The,
Yeah.
what they are being told you can file a complaint if
Yeah.
your girlfriend or former partner wants to have an abortion. How does this practically speaking work?
So Texas passed a law that, it's colloquially called the bounty law, where essentially you put a bounty on your exes or your neighbors or your friends' finances by saying that they were responsible for a particular abortion. So the Texas Right to Life group has decided to recruit by putting out an advertisement saying, if your ex, if your former spouse has sought an abortion and you didn't want them to have an abortion, we will represent you. And there are attorneys who are becoming millionaires representing these groups and representing these abusers in trying to go after their former spouses. It's a way to manipulate, it's a way to keep women in fear, and it's also a way to try to make a quick buck.
Yeah.
So we recently there was the case in Texas of a man who tried to sue his wife's friends for helping her get abortion medication and for essentially helping her leave him.
Yeah.
His whole point was that he didn't want her to leave and he didn't want her to get an abortion because he thought if she remained pregnant, then she would have to stay with him. So the friends helped her access abortion medication, and he sued them. He sued them for millions of dollars each. And this is a money-making
The
scheme.
the
And there
law
is a
allows
campaign.
that. Yeah.
There is a campaign, the Texas Right to Life has a campaign to get in league with abusers to help them further manipulate, coerce, and abuse their former spouses. And we are hoping to educate the public about how to get around these abusers and how to figure out a way to stay safe. Our helpline report shows that most people who get in trouble with the law are essentially reported by somebody that they trusted, be it a healthcare provider or somebody that they thought was a friend or a partner or a family member. So we unfortunately have to tell people to be very careful about who they tell. Um,
Yeah.
Make sure that the people that you are talking to about your pregnancy and about your desire or lack of desire to be pregnant are trustworthy people who have your back and who are respectful of your body autonomy and your ability to make certain choices.
Yes. Denise, you're a proud Latina,
I
so
am.
you are. Tell me about how this is impacting Latina communities, Latinx communities across the United States.
It's such a great question. And, Christina Nunez, whom I just spoke about, part of the issue with her is that she did not speak English well, and the hospital refused to provide her a translator the entire time that she was in the hospital. She was
My
not
goodness.
provided with proper translation, and she couldn't communicate. She couldn't explain. It's like, I have all these health issues. I have anemia. I have renal failure. I have high blood pressure. She was unable to communicate. So I think for our groups, for people who don't have English language proficiency, this is particularly complicated. Also, the ways that the immigration system are being weaponized to prevent people from accessing reproductive rights is really complicated. If you're in immigration detention, you cannot access an abortion right now. And
Right.
that's a huge violation of reproductive rights and of body autonomy. We have seen people who were criminalized for a miscarriage, then they were reported to the Child Protective Services, so-called Child Protective Services system, and separated from their children. And then they were referred to ICE for deportation and detained for deportation. So we have a case right now that we've seen where all these things happened in a row. So all of
Right.
these systems of state violence are working together. and because immigration is being empowered by the new administration to go into places that used to be verboten, it's really difficult now to tell people to access prenatal care. So people are being criminalized for not accessing prenatal care, and also people are being prevented from accessing prenatal care because they're afraid that if they go to the hospital, if they go to the doctor, that ICE will be
Right.
waiting for them and arrest them. And here in New York, again, a blue state, we've already seen a hospital working with ICE to detain people who were coming in for prenatal checkups. So it's really just the absolute worst case scenario for people in the Latinx community.
Well, that sounds just impossible to navigate. I mean, extremely difficult to do, to make the right decisions for yourself in this context.
Yeah, and
Uh,
the intersecting system means that if you get one kind of help, but these people don't have the full view of what is happening, then you won't be able to navigate all of these different things, right? If you have a criminal attorney who isn't aware of your immigration status, or who isn't aware of the way that the child separation system is going to be weaponized, then that means that you're getting one kind of help, but you're not getting holistic help. So part of what our organization tries to do is have all of these systems in full view so that we can provide advice to people that looks at all of these different points of vulnerability.
Tell me, how many cases or how many people do you help a month, if you can say, because you're doing a hotline and you're doing many other things.
Yeah, so the helpline last year received almost 3,000 calls. And that means that, and we do see peaks and valleys. So, for example, after the election of Donald Trump, we saw a huge spike in calls. After he was sworn in, we saw a huge spike in calls. Sometimes is as many as 300 calls per month. Sometimes there's a lull, depending on what's happening. But every time there's a change in the law that creates confusion, we see a spike in the number of calls. But yeah, last year it was about 3,000 calls the entire year. And that, doesn't take in, that's just the helpline. That doesn't
Right.
take into account the number of requests that we get to pay bail for people, the number of requests that we get to pay the legal fees for somebody who needs a local attorney. So we have a big workload. We're about 50 people in our organization, and we carry a big workload because we are a nationwide organization. But there is assistance out there. I mean, I will say there are resources. I really hope that people keep helpline numbers in their wallet, and they share it with their friends, and they know that there is a lot of assistance out there available.
Great. And we're going to publish the helpline number as you're speaking. If folks want to help, can they donate to If, When, How? And are there opportunities for lawyers or law students to volunteer with you all?
100%. Our network of lawyers and volunteers is constantly looking for people, again, nationwide, because we need to have a presence in every state to be able to help people in every state. If you're a law student and you don't have a chapter of If, When, How in your law school, you can still call us and become an individual member of our network. Our network accepts all kinds of lawyers. We always need help in all different facets of legal representation. So go to our website, check the network, become a member of our network, and absolutely donations are always welcome. It is a very difficult funding environment, as you know,
Yeah.
and having the resources to help people, it's always helpful. So go to the website, donate, volunteer. We are really here for all of it.
Thank you so much, Denise, for this sobering and somewhat scary explanation, and also for this hopeful message that we can do something, we could fight back. So we're with you. A luta continua.
A luta continua.
Continua.
Gracias. Thank you so
Muchas
much.
gracias.
Take care,
Talk soon.
Françoise.
Bye bye.
Expiro, expiro.